All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us here for Municipal Opportunities to Rescue Lake Simcoe. I'm Claire Malcolmson. I'm the Executive Director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. So the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, for anybody who has not met our group before, we're a lake-wide charity, and we look at in particular, the issues that are stressing the lake. We have 29 member groups, and we work with those member groups and governments at all levels, wherever we can, to advocate for positive change for Lake Simcoe. And so obviously this is a municipal focus. Many people here are probably municipal candidates, and I just wanted to say I applaud you for trying. Thank you. Doing public service is a big deal, and so I just wanted to start off by saying thanks for that. Here's our outline for the evening. We're going to start with a couple of councillors that you may know who have done some really effective advocacy for Lake Simcoe, and we'll do a quick Q&A with them, and then they have to leave by 7:20. I'm going to go through a couple of highlights of work that we have done really effectively. It's all work in progress, though, with municipal councils around Lake Simcoe to try to give some ideas of how a group like ours, a charitable organization, aims to work with council and what success looks like, and how we sort of take steps along the way. Those are protecting natural heritage, which is forests and wetlands, basically, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan is the LSPP. A little bit about the Bradford Bypass. And then we're going to really move into sort of where we're at now in Ontario. We have these growth plans. Many of them are very sprawling. York Regions is really sprawling. Durham Region, really sprawling. Simcoe County, they already had a lot of sprawl planned, so they've pared it back a little bit, but it's the challenge facing municipalities, I think, moving forward. So we're going to spend a little more time on that, and one of our interns, Joe Good, is going to share some highlights of the research that he's been doing to help provide candidates and councillors with some access to some tools that they could use to help reduce sprawl and save money for everybody, actually. And then we'll finish with some crowd-pleasing low-hanging fruit, because some of this stuff is really heavy, and there's also lots of really visible, fun stuff that you can do in your municipality that helps to set a really good environmental tone. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end of those sort of last 4 points. You can definitely put questions into the chat. Our other intern, Alessia Mole, is also with us tonight, and she's just monitoring the chat, and she'll read out some of the questions at the end. But also at the end, you'll be welcome to put up your hand and ask for questions. Okay, so with no further ado, I'm gonna get on, welcome our first two presenters. They are Dave Neeson from Georgina and Jonathan Scott from Bradford West Gwillimbury, and they are going to tell a little story. And this is just a placeholder slide for while they're talking. So take it away, Dave and Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Claire, and good evening, everyone. Claire mentioned I have to leave. I have another event. I'm currently in the kitchen at the event that I'm going to next, so I apologize for that. But I really wanted to join the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition this evening to talk about the work Councillor Neeson, myself, and a coalition of other councillors did to try to champion phosphorus reduction in Lake Simcoe. And Claire, I also want to thank you. I was thinking about 8 years ago, we had the retirement event for my mayor this year. And 8 years ago, we first met over email when you were doing work related to financial transparency in municipal elections. So that's just an interesting marker that I was reminded of today. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was curious about what was happening with this proposed phosphorus recycling facility. Two of the options for where it could be constructed are in my ward in Bradford. My ward contains about a quarter of Bradford's share of the Holland Marsh and about 3/4 of Bradford's share of the Holland River. So I was curious what had happened. I knew that former Environment Minister federally, Catherine McKenna, had announced about $16 million towards the project. And she made that announcement up in Ward 3 in Dave Neeson's ward. So he and I got in touch and we spoke to officials in the Prime Minister's office and the Federal Ministry of the Environment, as well as at Queen's Park and York Region. And a consensus essentially was the project's in a bit of a limbo stage because of a whole other host of issues, some of which are referenced on the slide behind us. So Dave and I started brainstorming up on the shores of Lake Simcoe and Jackson's Point about how we could move this forward. And we decided that the way to go is to have as many municipalities as possible unite together to pass a motion saying, we want this phosphorus recycling facility. It's the single largest reduction ever proposed to phosphorus in Lake Simcoe. Phosphorus is one of the largest problems that the lake faces. And we thought this was a really positive way to push for a piece of infrastructure. And because it became clear that funding was part of the issue, we had a core lobbying goal for the province to help pay for the balance, which was about $24 million. We worked very hard to get dozens of councillors to sponsor similar motions from King Township to Oro-Medonte, Brock to Innisfil, and all parts in between. Met with the Minister of the Environment and local MPPs provincially, even meeting with him at COP in Glasgow. And eventually it became clear that this was going to be something the province wanted to get behind. They included it in their budget, which finally passed in September. And so the funding was the core goal to break that logjam. And the media clipping on the screen, we really leveraged earned media coverage to support the campaign and build awareness. And it had a good snowballing effect through the media. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks for that, Councillor Scott, and thanks, Claire, for hosting tonight, certainly for all the work you do. And certainly you were a large part in the success of this story here, and so that goes without saying, but I have to reinforce that is that, you know, what we really did here between Councillor Scott and I was that, you know, we saw a really glaring need, and we know that there's lots of people out in the community that are concerned about the phosphorus levels in Lake Simcoe. So whether that's, you know, whether that's concerned citizens, whether it's environmental groups, NGOs, governments, other members of council, federal, provincial officials. So what we sort of had to do is sit down and say, okay, there's lots of areas in which people disagree. We all know that, you know, it's pretty tough to come to consensus on things in the environment that we're in today. But what the one common good that everybody here, and I'm assuming that's why we're all here, one thing we all care about, and it's genuine, both within everyone I just mentioned and here today, is that we care about the health of Lake Simcoe. And so if we care about the health of Lake Simcoe, we need to reduce the phosphorus load in Lake Simcoe. And so, you know, that's something that we were able to sort of send that message throughout that group and sort of unify everyone. And let's not have conversations about what we disagree upon, because those things are immaterial. What is important is we agree that phosphorus is the problem in Lake Simcoe, and so to deliver this particular piece of infrastructure simply makes sense. And we were able to sort of build that broad coalition that Jonathan mentioned, and certainly another unifier, as I've mentioned, is Claire, who's here tonight, who is also able to act in that regard. And so, you know, certainly for the municipal candidates here today, it's something I would encourage folks to do is that, you know, we can't be islands upon to ourselves. We get so very wrapped up in our own communities. And that's important because we represent our communities, but we also have this broader community we all care about, which is Lake Simcoe. And so, you know, it's really important that we keep some of those things in mind. And what that means is that we have to be collaborative and we have to organize and we have to build broad coalitions, you know, to come to consensus on Lake Simcoe protection. And so, excuse me. And so that's something that we were able to do. And interestingly enough, Claire was also a large help in this, as were others. This is something that, no pun intended, we also were able to recycle. Again, no pun intended. You know, when John and I sort of sat down with respect to the federal budget and said, geez, we haven't had Lake Simcoe funding the federal budget for 6 years. And so, but hey, we've created this core piece of infrastructure here between the NGOs, environmental groups, you know, concerned citizens, different orders of government, and certainly most importantly, members of the public and also the councils all the way around Lake Simcoe. And so we were also able to effectively sort of advocate for federal funding, resulting in the $20 million annual fund starting with Lake Simcoe for the Clean Water Action Fund. And so that's just an example. But what's important is that, or these are two important examples, the phosphorus recycling plant being of most paramount here to Lake Simcoe. But But what's important to, I think, pass along to sort of the future generations that, maybe elected members of government down the road here is that, the infrastructure here is in place. Claire is certainly always available and helpful. And so, this system has sort of been built. I think it was actually Claire, I think one of the local media called it, was it the Lake Simcoe Avengers? I think they named us or something like that. And so, another good reason to keep it alive because it needs a better name than that, I think, although it's kind of funny. But so thanks everyone for your time, and thank you, Claire, as well, for all of the work you do. This was certainly a great success story, and the work needs to continue post October 24th. Obviously, the funding is in place. That is done. We all know that. But the plant needs to get built, and so my understanding is the region is agreed to operate it. But we have to get to the EA and actually build it. And so the funding is there. It's the most important piece. So I hope everyone's learned a little bit from brief sort of case study there, but I'm always happy to answer questions at any time. Claire certainly has my contact information should anyone want to talk about it.
All right. Thank you, both of you. I should say this is not an endorsement of any candidates. This is just a good story. These guys did some really great work, and it was a good example of partnership, I think, between the ENGO sector and government, municipal government, getting the provincial government to agree to pay the rest of the bill. It was kind of like there's money on the table. Everyone says they're going to save Lake Simcoe. Now let's put the money where your mouth is, basically. So that was really important. I do want to say, for anybody who thinks, oh, great, Lake Simcoe's saved, unfortunately not. This, first of all, this plant has to pass an EA and get built. And then we'll find out how much phosphorus it actually is able to remove from the water column. But for context, what we're hearing is it will remove between 2.5 and 5 tons of phosphorus every year. About 90 to 100 tons a year goes into the lake on average, but it swings really widely year to year. And we're trying to cut the loads in half. So we're really trying to get rid of about 45 tons of phosphorus loading a year. So this plant is helpful, and as Jonathan said, is the biggest reduction in phosphorus if it's built than we will have ever seen. But it's just one of many things. And so it was really important for me that this not get used as a tool in the further development of Upper York region. It was sort of going to be used as an offset for a proposed sewage treatment plant. And, our group and Georgina Island First Nation and some others are opposed to the Upper York sewage system discharging more sewage into Lake Simcoe, partly because I don't trust the offset. The offsets will work. Offsetting doesn't really work that well. It's been tested in a lot of places. So anyway, there's a lot of more work to be done on getting this plant built, but it's a good example. So I do want to see if anybody has any questions right now for these two in terms of tactics or barriers or whatever. They're going to go soon, so ask now or hold your peace. 7:16. Okay, well then I'll ask a question. Were either of you surprised at how quickly this came together, or the flip side of that question is what were the big hurdles that you overcame here?
I'll take that one because I get to make fun of Dave a bit in answering it. I was slightly surprised at how long it took because we had pretty good assurances that it was going to happen as early as January, and it wasn't formally announced, I think, until the end of April, right before the provincial election. Dave was much more impatient and would constantly be calling me up saying, when's this going to happen? Like, they say it's going to happen. When's it actually going to get announced? We need it announced. And the one thing I guess I was surprised about was the way the provincial budget cycle dovetailed with the election. The budget itself wasn't passed until the end of August, beginning of September. So that part caught me off guard. But I think I was a little bit they say they're going to do it. We'll just have to wait for the announcement. Dave was calling me up once a week saying, it's been another week. When are they going to announce it?
Yeah, the only thing I can add to that, Claire, just in terms of barriers, is it's funny, you know, there's sometimes in your mind, and sort of what John had just explained was just that, you know, as Jonathan said, it was pretty clear that, you know, this is something we were going to get given the broad coalition and the conversations we were having, and there was very much a unified voice around the lake. And notwithstanding that, the province also knew, you know, certainly at least our local MPP, you know, that the town of Georgina was opposed to the Upper York. I had written a motion at our council that passed unanimously. Mayor Quirk was here, can certainly speak for the town, but the council passed it. You know, but so I sort of figured, okay, this should be, you know, this is fairly easy. It's untied from the Upper York, which is what we want. You know, what's the holdup here? And so the barrier in that was that, in all honesty, is having a broad sounding board, one of which was John, because, you know, we had sort of agreed at the outset, you know, this is going to be a positive campaign. We're going to coalition build. We're going to run a campaign. We're going to be organized with earned media and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, when you don't see the progress, you immediately want to sort of, the frustration sets in, and you want to sort of turn negative's not the right word, but you sort of want to begin to get a little bit louder and maybe a little bit more aggressive. And so John was a good bellwether there to sort of keep me, you know, keep me reassured that, you know, we're doing well, we're going to get this, and, you know, it doesn't serve our interest in any way to sort of, you know, call out, you know, members of the legislature or anything like that. You know, let's sit on it. So, yeah, so that was sort of the hard part for me, but turned out he was right. But that's always something to watch, right? Is we all want to see progress quickly, but we realize at some level that it can be slow and we have to be measured.
But I think that's actually a really good point. The one thing we did do was we leveraged provincial opposition figures to be the ones to try and poke a little bit more. So Green Party leader Mike Schreiner and Liberal critic Lucille Collard and NDP critic Jennifer French, who were all particularly fantastic advocating for this. They kind of got to be the ones to inject just a little bit more pressure where we were trying to have more of a coalition building approach that took people at their word. But when it did drag on a bit longer, some of the opposition parties stepped up and just made sure that it was on the agenda at Queen's Park by asking questions and sending letters.
It's a really, really good point. Thank you for making all those points. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if Korea is here. I don't want to change my screen right now, but there were definitely other members of other councils. You know, I know who you are. I know who the councillors are, and people will tell me, you know, who are the councillors who are most likely to step up and say, yeah, I'm going to help advance an environmental resolution. And so please, you know, if you're elected and that's you, please let people know, let your, you know, other environmental councillors know, but let me know, let your local groups know, because we really do need you, and it's quite complicated a lot of the time to try to figure out who is where and doing what. But it's really critical that there's somebody in every municipality on council who's going to be able to champion environmental causes. Obviously not every single one, but the things that resonate for them. I see that Joe has a question. You want to ask a question, Joe?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, and thanks so much, Dave and Jonathan, for your time. My question is, how connected were you to the people you were networking with? Did you know them? How hard was it to track them down and book meetings? Was it smooth? Were you motivated? Was it challenging? How did all that, how was all that?
I can start if that's okay with John. Well, I'll start with the challenges piece, because that's sort of what sticks out. You know, we just spoke about the barriers. And so the challenges, there was a lot. I mean, it was very time consuming, you know, in aggregate. I don't know, we probably put, you know, at least 3 or 4 months of work into it in aggregate if you were working full time. So, you know, it was significant. And as you know, with, you know, elected members specifically, you know, it's sort of like herding cats. Everyone's so busy, they're in so many different places, they have different interests, they, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so just even to organize a phone call can be a complete nightmare with members of councils, so especially in other areas, right? So that was really challenging and really time consuming. And in terms of the relationships, you know, there was a couple, you know, as an example, I have a good relationship with Councillor Jubb over in Brock. and he was of great assistance over in Brock because we wanted to ensure it was the entirety of the watershed that passed us. But I'll be honest with you, there's many that I didn't know. There's some that we had sort of specifically recruited, to be honest with you. Their member of provincial parliament, would be conservative. And so we sort of thought, okay, let's try and find a conservative leaning councillor that has roots within that party and sort of, get them to bring this forward, at their council and get their buy-in. And so, difficult at times, but there's some lasting relationships there as well. Insofar as they, feel like we made progress and they understand and they brought it forward. And, and then the other thing is they were very engaged. And so, and certainly with Claire and others' help is that, they really saw the value. And once this, started to get positive traction, they're even more engaged and they want to tell more people about it, other members of council about it. And it's funny, it almost becomes this, as opposed to a race to the bottom, it becomes a race to the top because they're like, geez, I want to do something cool for Lake Simcoe now. Like, This is really cool and we're getting traction and we're winning. And that's not normally the case. So like, what's the cool thing we can do now that I can bring up or whatever, right? And so yeah, that's sort of what I got there. John?
Yeah, I think that's, no, I think you nailed it because that it's a great question too. That relational organizing approach of, it all started because I had a question and thought Dave knew the answer. And we joined, the councillors that we knew were the ones we first asked, but Claire and Jack Gibbons from the North Gwillimbury Forest Alliance also made a lot of connections. And then at the provincial level, I had worked for a former premier, so I knew some of the staff and the MPPs at Queen's Park and on the Hill that we could work through. But it was a constant set of building those relational concentric circles. I was in Glasgow for COP with a client. We made sure we got to connect with the Minister of the Environment there to essentially remind him of the project, and that was an example of using another connection that I just happened to have because we were the number of Canadians in a single Scottish city that we could have a meeting there. So there were a bunch of different ways, but I think it was a really good synergy of the ENGO groups working well with municipal councillors and constantly broadening out that Venn diagram of who had a relationship with who. I am sorry, I am going to have to sign off now, but if there are any other questions, I'm happy to contact them over email or over Twitter or something like that, but I do have to run to another event. I apologize.
Okay, not a problem. No, it's 7:20-ish, so thanks a lot for your work. I learned a lot there, actually. I didn't know all these pieces of the story, so thank you very much, Jonathan and Dave, for sharing that. I'm gonna go back in time a little bit here, actually. So what part of what I think helped lay the foundation for this work actually was that you probably know the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition was the group that spearheaded the campaign to get the Lake Simcoe Protection Act. I worked on that campaign at a desk at Environmental Defense, which was really the pointy end of the stick there. For lots of campaigning and lobbying experience there. So we got the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and Plan, and then 10 years later, there's a statutory requirement for the province of Ontario to review the plan and see if they think it needs to change, and that has to be supported by evidence and science. And so, I stepped in to be the executive director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition in 2018, anticipating that a big change in government would mean that this legislation might have a bit of a rough ride. And so we were going around to I went and delegated to, I think, every municipality around the lake, asking for support for the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, and explained some of what I just explained earlier this evening around the phosphorus situation and what was needed, and climate change and impacts of development and the state of natural heritage, and really to just paint the picture like this is actually what it is. And we can't be laissez-faire about this. We actually really need to get it together and work across our jurisdictional boundaries. And, Mayor Lynn Dolan in Innisfil always says she likes to stick in her lane. We were really pushing a lot of municipalities to not stick in their lane and to actually get out and collaborate, because a lake doesn't actually care what municipality you're in. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It just needs the action, right? So this helped to seed, I think, the understanding of the issues. Many, there's of course a member of every municipality in the Conservation Authority. They maybe don't get the information in quite the same way that I like to present it. But anyway, so we did so this is a long way of saying one of the things that we did at the municipal level was get support for the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan through municipal resolutions of the municipalities that are listed here. And we also had petitions as well to just generally help raise awareness and help people sort of pass the information about the campaign. So again, big thanks. Why is Kenneth, he is on Romera question. Are you writing on my screen? Wow, I didn't even know that was possible. No, Romera is not on the list there. I need to go to the next slide. Okay, another really fun story of engaging with municipalities that I have had the pleasure of undertaking over the last year. Protecting natural heritage. So I'm going to try to make this fairly simple, but it's not that simple. So the province created a map layer in the growth plan called the Natural Heritage System for the Growth Plan. And then they had a number of criteria that they followed in creating that map, but they knew that they wouldn't have all the details. So they then give it to Simcoe County, York Region, Durham Region, upper tiers. And then they look at it and they refine it. And then so what you're looking at here is actually Simcoe County's refinement of the growth plan, natural heritage system. So the red stuff is all the stuff that Simcoe County said, let's take out. And we thought, wow, this is really terrible. So here on the left side of your screen, you have the Oro-Medonte shoreline and all this beautiful high quality natural cover that the province thought could be in the growth plan natural heritage system, and Simcoe County said, no, we'll take it out. And then here again at Big Bay Point, now tons of natural heritage that the county removed. So I have a master's in planning. I read all the documentation. I knew what the rules were. And then I started talking to planning staff and to interested members of the community and to councillors. So I'll tell the good story first. So in Innisfil, which is here, this is Big Bay Point, we have a ton of what's called high quality natural cover, sort of self-explanatory. We were trying to make the case to Simcoe County and to Innisfil, who had to provide this information to Simcoe County, that in fact, we should be protecting every inch of natural heritage that met the province's criteria. And so those little yellow squares are just comment boxes of places that we identified should not be removed from the growth plan natural heritage system. And so then council was extremely supportive. I think there was unanimous support for asking their planning staff to review the very detailed analysis that we had done in collaboration with many community members. Thank you very much. And to those community members. And then the staff at Innisfil did a really good job. And they said, actually, you're right. A number of these areas that Simcoe County removed because they were plans of subdivision are not plans of subdivision. They were registered in 1920. They are no longer active. They should have been taken off the records like decades ago. So a good example of bureaucracy. And so Innisfil followed up, and they in fact added some other areas that they thought should remain in the NHS, and they supplied that information to Simcoe County. And basically, it looks like we have won on most of these, in many of these areas anyway. And there's another really big chunk just north of Guildford that was going to be an estate lot golf course, which is totally a relic of the 80s that we shouldn't be building anymore. And they wouldn't get approval to do something like that now. So it was added back to the NHS too. So that was really lots of support from council, not so much behind the scenes actually, but in the council chambers saying, yes, we support this. Yes, we're directing staff to work with our citizens and the coalition to provide advice to the county that will protect as much natural heritage as possible. This is really detailed, annoying, and nerdy work. But if you've got somebody coming to you saying, here's the work, please pass it on to your planner to try to get this done, right? We don't have another planet. Let's protect all of our trees. The story in Oromodonte was unfortunately the total opposite. The staff, I guess at council's direction, sent a report to Simcoe County that had no supporting evidence or justification. They just circled areas on a map. That was it. So I went to council and said, sorry, we missed this earlier meeting. We didn't know about it. Here's our advice. We would like you to support us and ask that Simcoe County protect these natural spaces. And we understand that you've already provided your advice to the county, so can we see it? And no one really answered. And then one of the councillors, Randy Greenlaw, said, well, no, and we had been working with him a little bit behind the scenes, and he said, no, I think we would like to see that, please. It's a staff report. And another one of the councillors attacked him for asking for a staff report, which is paid for by the taxpayer, by the way. So I don't think that staff reports should be hidden from the public that pays for them. And so I had to do a freedom of information request to get the staff report that Oromodonte had already sent to Simcoe County. So, on the one hand, we had the Oromodonte Council saying, oh, aren't you wonderful? Oh, thank you so much for protecting the environment, blah, blah. And then on the other hand, they hid their really inadequate documentation from us and the public. And as a result, Simcoe County's natural heritage system now certainly does not include all of the areas that we had indicated we thought should be added. I mean, the story is not over, but there was definitely a lot more room for that council to move in terms of being very responsive to the environment. So it is important. These details matter, and we have planning staff for a reason. So let's please try to use them to help protect the lake, which everybody says they want to protect. I'm going to do a very quick thing about the Bradford Bypass. This is just to show you where it is going to go. If it is built, it would connect the 404 over here to the 400 over here. And it goes through a lot of greenbelt and evaluated and unevaluated wetlands, and it crosses the East and West Holland rivers. And all of these people that live here are in the high-risk air pollution corridor. So we think it's a pretty bad plan. I know it's really controversial. Some people think it should go ahead. But what we did here basically was there were a couple of opportunities for this item to come up on the council agenda. So when something comes up on the council agenda, that's when we can speak to the item. So we were really happy. Two things happened. One, the Ministry of Transportation or the project consultant, ACOM, who's running the project team for the Bradford Bypass, they were making presentations to councils. And so when they did that, we also asked to get on the agenda. And then the other opportunity was Mayor Lynn Dolan from Innisfil asked all the municipalities in Simcoe County to support the Bradford Bypass. And so we went to all of the councils and said, please don't support the Bradford Bypass. Actually, there's a terrible plan in play, and the government of Ontario was going to municipalities to say, we're going to do all of these studies and it's going to be fine and Lake Simcoe won't be harmed. And then I was able to say, but what they haven't told you is that right now they have a proposal on the Ontario Environmental Registry of Ontario to exempt this project from the very process that they've just laid out for you. And actually the process that they propose to follow is this. So I would suggest you don't just blindly accept what the deputy minister from the Ministry of Transportation told you, that it's not going to affect Lake Simcoe, because it will. I mean, it's pretty close to Lake Simcoe, and this is all, river, wetland. There's some quite a lot of farmland up here too. There's a bit of farmland here that would be crossed So anyway, those are things to look for, opportunities to delegate, and certainly if you are in council and there are items that are of concern to you, and you know some of the environmental groups or community groups are concerned about them, let those groups know that that's on the agenda, because it gives them an opening to speak to that. So what we did was we went around and made municipal delegations, and we asked municipalities to support our request for a federal impact assessment. Barrie, Newmarket, Brock, Scugog, Ramera, and Adhalatas Orontiო did pass those resolutions. Another, Georgina passed a resolution asking for the studies that you would find in a full provincial EA. And 2 or 3 resolutions basically supported the Bradford Bypass, but with a list of studies that frankly are at this point under the sole discretion of the Ministry of Transportation, with no outside commenting government agency or any legislative threshold to demonstrate the legitimacy of the studies. And in Innisfil, where they have historically always supported the Bradford Bypass, it was a deadlock vote, so no vote one way or the other. And then on the right side of your screen, you can see the locations of those. So we were actually really happy with that municipal result. I think it showed a lot of getting out of their silo, out of their lane, and putting the health of the lake first, and actually really just asking for adequate process, which is really lacking with Bradford Bypass. All right, so on to sort of the concerns of today, the big concerns moving forward. We worked with Environmental Defense and a lot of other ENGOs on a collaborative called Yours to Protect. And that work turned into a lot of Stop Sprawl campaigns. I ended up starting Stop Sprawl York Region in March of this year because nobody else was doing that, and there was a lot to object to. So, I mean, you can see here, this was sort of the extent of the proposed sprawl. You can see this on our website under current activities, municipal comprehensive reviews, if you want more information. So Joe is going to take us through a little bit more detail after this slide. So as municipal councillors, this is really the most important thing for you to know about sprawl. Sprawl costs us all. So Hemson is a consulting company that did a report about the cost of sprawl in Ottawa. You can find this. There's a CBC article about this that's easy to find. And basically what they found was that low density development added $465 per person to their property tax assessment, and that by building high density, they were actually able to save money, $606 per person. So it's not going to be exactly that figure in every single municipality, but Hemson is not really a slouch organization, and they should be listened to. So, I mean, this is really, in addition to all the environmental arguments for not sprawling, the cost argument is one that, as a councillor, we really need you folks to advance, because we know money talks. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Joe to do a quick presentation about some of the tools we can use to solve some of the problems of sprawl.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for having me out and letting me speak tonight. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Dave Neeson, for coming out. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And yeah, thank you so much in getting the phosphorus work done there. That was a lot of work and definitely some good networking. I'm obviously interested in that. So in and amongst all of this discussion about Lake Simcoe and the Lake Simcoe watershed and saving Lake Simcoe, amongst the Bradford Bypass, the policy work done in Innisfil and in Oro-Medonte, there is something else that Claire mentioned that's been going on in Lake Simcoe, and that's in the Lake Simcoe watershed, and that's sprawl. So I am going to talk to you about that. So as mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about rental and affordable housing in York Region and how to increase it. So what is the context that I will be speaking to you about today? And what is urban sprawl? Well, urban sprawl refers to housing developments that focus on single-family detached homes. These are single-family detached homes that are very large and take up a lot of space, and only typically one family lives in these types of homes. You see them kind of typically in these new development sites all over York Region. Over the past 10 years, housing development has mostly been single-family homes and condominiums. The issue is that these housing types do not provide affordable options for lower and middle income residents. These houses are often, on average, $1 million. And the police officers, the nurses, the workers cannot afford to live in these houses. There's also environmental impacts from sprawl, including cutting into the greenbelt, paving over farmland, and reducing supply of locally grown food. There's road salt deposition in Lake Simcoe, phosphorus pollution of water bodies via stormwater runoff. And there's long-term adverse negative cumulative effects on Lake Simcoe and York regional biodiversity. And what that means is everything combined together over the long term is detrimental to the lake's health. So that's the next question. How do we stop building these single-family detached homes and condos? And how do we make houses more affordable for those police officers and those nurses and those teachers? I'm going to present 3 tools that councillors can use, you councillors can use to reduce the amount of single-family detached homes and increase the amount of affordable housing. Number 1, missing middle housing. Number 2, rental housing development. And number 3, ending exclusionary zoning. So what is the missing middle? The missing middle are homes that blend in with single-family detached homes and typically house multiple families under a single roof. They include newly built units and retrofitting existing single-family structures to fit multiple families. So on this diagram here, what you can see is on the left, we have this traditional single-family detached home, a big house. It takes up a lot of space and only one family lives in that. On the other side of the spectrum, we have these mid-rises that are 10, 12 stories high, but these houses these mid-rises don't necessarily fit into single-family detached home neighborhoods. So how do we increase the amount of families at an affordable rate in current single detached family home neighborhoods and on its own? That's where the middle of the spectrum comes in. As you can see, these houses look, they almost blend into single family detached neighborhoods. And that's the idea. We want to build them to blend in very nicely and gently to single family detached neighborhoods. And guess what? They're affordable. So these are the kind of houses that we want to build. Number 2, rental housing. So what this slide shows here is this slide shows the York Region average rental prices for the last 10 years for private apartments and rental condominiums from the years 2011 to 2021. As you can see, the private apartments have increased by $394 or 38% over 10 years. That's a huge amount of money. And also considering that the wages that we've received have not increased as much. For rental condominiums, these are condos that have been built. People own them and are renting them out to renters. Those prices of those condos, to rent those condos, have increased by 43% or $671. Currently, the average rental price for a private apartment building, a private apartment, is around $1,500. And the average price for a condo rental is around $2,200. So the point is that there needs to be an increase in rental housing, and this should bring down the rental rates. And we need to build more affordable housing so those doctors, those or those paramedics, those teachers, those police officers can afford to live in York Region. Number 3, ending exclusionary zoning. So exclusionary zoning is a regulatory tool used to prevent building multifamily housing in suburbs composed predominantly of single-family detached homes. It's legally defined as a residential zoning plan whose requirements as a minimum lot size and house size have the effect of excluding low-income residents. And that's exactly what exclusionary zoning does. It prevents building this missing middle type of housing and only allows single-family large detached homes that take up a lot of space. It's that they're unsustainable. That same amount of land could be used to house 3 or 4 families. And this is a policy issue. This is a regulatory issue. So this type of zoning segregates lower and middle income households from areas that have better amenities like school systems, hospitals, and public services. It's not sustainable and is a barrier for those households to improve their economic situation and well-being. So the summary, what have we discussed? We've discussed that sprawl is unsustainable and has negative adverse impacts on York regional socio and biophysical environments. The 3 key political tools that can be used to reduce the impacts of sprawl include 1, develop the missing middle housing, 2, increasing the supply of affordable rental units, and 3, ending exclusionary zoning. If you're a municipal councillor, use these tools. If you're a member of the public, continue to learn, discuss, and advocate for these types of solutions in York Region. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe. That was great. So there's just a very quick rundown of some of the research that Joe's doing. We'll have more on that later on. If you can stop sharing, that would be great, Joe. So yeah, just wanted to add a couple of sort of high level points to that. You know, climate change is not going away. Every time we're building another sprawling suburb of car dependent households, we are eliminating the opportunity to build sustainable communities. And we should not be building unsustainable communities anymore. There is a real affordability issue. You know, I'm sure anybody who is running right now is aware that it's really top of mind. And so as councillors, you've got to be able to provide actual solutions. The province's approach isn't really aimed at providing more affordable housing. It's really oriented towards building more single-family home style developments. Although, of course, there is a mix in what their policy outlines. But what the world needs is more affordable units. And so I don't think we should be telling people, yeah, everybody deserves a single family home if they can't afford it. I mean, we need to just actually build the stuff that people can afford. There are a lot of environmental benefits for doing that, and a lot of social justice benefits for doing that as well. You know, there's a ton of evidence that mixed communities are much more functional. The schools are better. There's less bullying. People are healthier and happier when they can walk from place to place. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there all around Lake Simcoe. So those statistics that Joe just shared were from York Region. There are pretty similar statistics in Simcoe County from what I've seen as well. Okay, so whoopsie, I have to start sharing my screen again. I just lost where I was. And I'm just going to go through a couple of topics here. Okay. All right. So if you are a candidate and if you are successful, here are 3 things that we are asking for right now. 1, we really need municipal councils to help support us in asking the province to evaluate the impact to Lake Simcoe of the province's planned doubling of the watershed population in the next 20 to 30 years. It is really not just about sewage. It's important that people know that stormwater is actually the largest the largest source of pollution affecting Lake Simcoe right now, urban stormwater. So road building, salt impacts from new highways and from new roads is a serious growing threat to Lake Simcoe. And all of these things chip away at the lake's health. We also need municipal councils to help tell the province to stop the Bradford Bypass in its current location at least, and to stop the Upper York sewage system entirely. If we can't accommodate the wastewater, then we should not be doing all the building here. And anyway, it's complicated, but that's something that we could really use some help on. And then in your own municipality, if you want to help protect Lake Simcoe, you should really be advocating for putting money into the capital budget for improving stormwater control and maintenance, really prioritizing water infiltration into the soil to recharge our aquifers rather than water being conveyed away, which was the sort of engineering solution of the 50s to the 90s started to change. And also, really excellent and low-tech solution for pollution and for climate change and to help slow down the warming of our waters is to make sure that rivers are shaded and ponds are shaded and shorelines are shaded. So tree planting and shoreline resident education around those things are top items for Lake Simcoe. This is a picture of all the happy people at Big Bay Point when the premier at the time said he would introduce the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. I thought you might just anticipate being cheered on for doing something awesome. And then actually one of our social media friends commented saying, don't forget about this sort of easy stuff. So I wanted to put in low-hanging and popular fruit as a few things that people could do if they're in council. If you've ever been to Vancouver, you would be, like me, you'll be amazed at the gorgeous little gardens that are in their roundabouts and in the traffic calming areas. Putting pollinator gardens instead of grass in medians and in your public spaces, creating conditions where you need to use two-stroke engines less or your maintenance staff. Those are pretty easy to do and really popular and really help create an environment where people feel like the environment is being protected and taken care of, because it is. Cleaning up trash, obviously, basic, good sign that you're taking care of the environment. Creating more bike lanes. I mean, don't do it where it's super crazy and dangerous and where you just have like a strip of paint to separate people from cars going 80 kilometers an hour. But, put a shoulder on some of these large rural roads and create some bike tourism. Plant native plants and create community. I saw something on social media the other day, and it wasn't exactly this, but the city of Toronto, I know every municipality is obviously not Toronto, but they have really great environmental volunteer opportunities and pretty easy pathways to get people involved. And some of that is just around helping out with invasive species control and park maintenance, actually. So if that's something that you're struggling with your capital budget, I don't think it's just a question of like, do we do it or do we not do it? Sometimes, maybe the people that are on these endless community committees that are just talking and talking and talking about what policy they might like to see, maybe they would just like to help go out and pull some invasive species from time to time. You never know. You won't know if you don't ask. Anyway, this stuff is, it's easy, it's popular, it makes the municipality look good, and it's definitely good for the environment. I wanted to end with just sharing a few resources with you. So I just have 2 slides here. So one is that Environmental Defense and Yours to Protect have put together a 905 municipal litmus test I'm not going to go through all that, but I will point out that it does say listen to local ENGOs. Oh, look, Stop Sprawl York Region, Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition are there. I actually didn't even notice it until I had it this big. So this is available on social media. They have environmental defense environment platforms. Many of the points that I've talked about today are on here too. And also giving credit where credit is due, absolutely. We have, okay, well, I'm gonna start with, this is an image from the Simcoe Community Leaders Guide, which is put together by Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition and Just Recovery Simcoe, and includes contributions from at least 20 different community groups. So quick facts and tips for people who are running for council or who want to know what questions to ask council. They're all there. And this is the environmental defense infographic and social media. Just you could go on Twitter and search environmental defense 905, you can probably find it. And then on Stop Sprawl, we have a candidate resource guide. And there's quite a lot of information that you've heard here today as well. So I'm going to end my presentation actually and see if there are any questions out there or other topics and ideas that people think would be really helpful for us to talk about here. So if you have an idea or a comment, I guess if anybody has a are there any questions in here in the chat? I don't think so.
No, Claire, there's not any
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
Dave was just mentioning he's going to send you a resource to share with everybody.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, folks, any questions? I'm going to put some of these links into the chat so that people can just load them right now on their computer. This is my favorite, the Simcoe Community Leaders Resource. Really awesome collaborative effort.
Sorry, this is Namala Armstrong. Can I just ask, could we get a copy of this? Because there's some very good information and I was trying to take some notes, but it's was too quick. And I am one of the candidates. I was a former regional councillor for the city of Markham and I am running again.
Well, congratulations. Good for you for running. Yes, I will. Well, this is recorded, so absolutely we can share this recording with you. Are you asking, can I share the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, everything that was presented today.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Thanks for the question. We have everybody's email who registered, so we can follow up with an email there. Well, we were scheduled to go to 8:30 if needed. I'm happy to end it early if there are no other questions, but I don't want to end it too soon if people are just sort of thinking maybe I might have a question. I don't know if there are any other people who are running for council here who have any tips or sort of topics that you think that we should also discuss here. I'm happy to have an open chat about that. But first we'll take Susan's question. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to ask where people can access that link. Will it be on the Lake Simcoe region, the Rescue Lake Simcoe webpage?
Which link?
Sorry, the link to the presentation, the recorded presentation.
I think we will, yeah, we'll put it under the Municipal Comprehensive Review and Official Plans area of our website. And I will provide a link to people who have registered for this too.
Yeah, because I invited, a whole lot of candidates and a few have showed up, but many have not. And I thought I would just send them the link afterwards. And yeah, a couple expressed interest in seeing it later.
Yeah, I got that from a few people too. So thanks, Susan. Yeah, we'll try to get that done relatively quickly. Unfortunately, our typical communications person is off for the rest of the week. She's in Vancouver, so it'll have to wait till next week. But in the meantime, you can definitely send people these links, this community leader piece and the environmental defense one. I'm just loading the links in the chat right now. So yeah, if people have our Stop Sprawl, there's also the Stop Sprawl one, which has candidate resources as well. I guess I'll just add something. You know, I had a meeting in Simcoe County with some interested councillors, and what we did was we really brainstormed about the things that they're hearing at the door from people, from voters, and we had some discussion about some of those topics as well. One of the, and many of them we've talked about here today. One of the tips that I thought was actually really valuable was strategically right now, if you're interested in environmental protection, there's very little money for charities. I mean, the Trillium Fund doesn't actually really fund environmental charities anymore. The money for our groups is going to be much harder to come by. So when you're thinking about how a project is going to move ahead, the advice is really that you look at what federal funding is available. So the federal government right now is looking at climate change in a pretty big way and protecting natural areas. It's a little harder to do in the south because the areas are they're relatively small plots. But the federal government is certainly investing in housing and affordable housing. And so I really strongly recommend that anybody who's in council, you know, get in touch with AMO, ask your staff, but don't just stop after you've asked your staff. There may be more resources available. I had to work pretty hard to get information from the MP Tony Van Bynen's office, but they did produce a list of areas that they are funding, and they did say, you know, it's probably going to change again pretty soon because we have a new budget coming out. But clean water, affordable housing, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and affordable housing, if I didn't already say that, those are areas that they are definitely funding. And so just to recognize that really almost nothing moves ahead without money. So it's important to sort of connect the dots and apply for grants, get your staff to apply for those grants. In Durham region, there is a program called Durham Greener Homes, which again has lots of federal funding to help do home energy retrofits in existing homes. And, you know, why not tack on add a secondary suite in your home? And that increases the supply of affordable housing without having to build in any new farm fields. And you help provide some more income for the person who owns that home in the first place. And it's a greener home. You know, there's a lot of stuff like Simcoe County is already doing that. They already have funding for an individual that wants to create a second suite in their home up to $30,000. And that is actually through an Ontario government incentive, which to be honest, I don't know if it still exists, but it did last year. So there's a lot that you can do at the municipal level if you're focused on it to provide more affordable housing, to address the urgent need that Ontarians are feeling right now, and at the same time actually help protect our environment by not overbuilding in our precious forests and wetlands and farmlands in particular. Are there any other questions here? I think if I don't see any questions in the next minute or so, then I'm just gonna end it here and say good night to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and all of you who are running for council or informing somebody's campaign. I hope this has been helpful for you. Some thumbs up. Okay, great.
Claire, I just want to say thank you very much for all the work you've done in that and that stuff, and also putting this on for tonight. It's been very informative. Really appreciate the time in that. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I really appreciate hearing that as well. Yeah, it can feel sometimes like you're out on your own doing this work, and so I really wanted to make sure that everybody knew that they're not. If environment is one of the reasons you're getting involved in municipal politics, you are not alone. You've got friends and supporters, and just please make use of our networks. Finally, I guess I should say we're a charity with very little money. And if anybody is interested in helping us out with a donation, we would absolutely love that. And I'll put a link in here too, but I'm sorry I didn't think of that earlier. Too focused on the work and not enough on the fundraising. Anyway, I'm just gonna hang around here until I get the link. There we go.